I was 29 when this happened, and at the time I was a seasonal park ranger for a large national forest in the Pacific Northwest. I won't name the park, mostly because I still know people who work there, and partly because I don't want this story tied to a specific place. If you've ever spent time in remote parks, you already know it could be almost anywhere. I wasn't the adventurous adrenaline junkie type people imagine when they hear park ranger. I took the job because I liked routine, quiet, and being outdoors without people constantly talking at me. My role was mostly maintenance and patrol, checking trailheads, closing gates, logging campsite activity, and responding to the occasional lost hiker or illegal fire. This happened in late October, just before the park shut down most of its facilities for winter. The days were shorter, colder, and empty in a way that felt peaceful instead of lonely. Tourists were gone. Campgrounds were mostly deserted. Wildlife was more active than people. That night started like dozens of others. I was assigned to a swing shift, ending just after midnight. My task list was simple: patrol the northern access road, check 3 primitive campsites, and lock the old service gate by the river. Nothing unusual had been reported, no missing persons, no disturbances. I remember feeling calm, almost bored, as I pulled out of the ranger station in my truck. The radio crackled once with static, then went quiet. I had no idea that by morning I'd be filling out a report no one would ever read about a man the park pretended never existed. The first couple of hours were uneventful. I drove slowly with the windows cracked, letting the cold air keep me alert. My headlights caught fog rolling low over the road, the kind that looks thicker than it actually is. Every now and then, I stopped to log mile markers or check that no one had parked overnight at closed trailheads. At the first campsite, I found exactly what I expected: an empty fire ring, damp ground, and a picnic table covered in leaves. I scribbled notes on my clipboard, took a quick look around with my flashlight, and moved on. I grabbed a protein bar from the glove compartment and ate it while driving. The radio stayed silent, which wasn't unusual. Cell service had dropped out miles back. The second campsite was near the river. You could hear the water before you saw it, a steady rushing sound that drowned out almost everything else. I parked, stepped out, and did my usual walkthrough. No tents, no vehicles, no footprints that looked fresh. What I remember most is how normal everything felt. I wasn't tense, I wasn't jumpy. I was thinking about what I'd cook when I got home and whether I'd bother watching anything before bed. By the time I headed toward the final site, the clock on the dashboard read 10:47 p.m. The road narrowed there, gravel crunching under the tires, trees closing in tighter. My headlights barely reached beyond the next curve. That was when I saw the first sign that something was off. It was small enough that at the time, I didn't even write it down. As I rounded a bend near mile marker 17, my headlights swept across the shoulder and caught movement. I slowed instinctively, expecting maybe a deer or elk. Instead, it was a person. He was standing just off the road, half hidden by trees. A man, maybe in his 40s or 50s, wearing dark clothes and a hooded jacket. He wasn't trying to flag me down. He wasn't walking. He was just standing there, facing the road. I rolled to a stop about 20 feet away and lowered the window. "Hey," I called out. "Park's closed to foot traffic at night. You okay?" He didn't answer. At first, I thought he hadn't heard me over the river, even though it was farther away here. I tried again, louder. Still nothing. He turned his head slightly, just enough that I could see his face in the edge of my headlights. Pale, expressionless. His eyes reflected the light in a dull way that made it hard to tell where he was looking. "You camping nearby?" I asked. After a long pause, he said, "I know." That was it. Just those two words. His voice was flat, almost bored. I waited for more, but it didn't come. I told myself he was probably a local, maybe someone fishing late or walking off something personal. People did weird things in parks at night. I made a mental note to log it later and asked him to head back toward the main road. He didn't respond, didn't move, just kept standing there. Eventually I drove on. In the mirror, I watched him until the road curved and the trees swallowed him again. I remember thinking how strange it was that he hadn't asked for help or even acknowledged who I was. I didn't know then that I'd see him again, much closer. The last campsite was another 10 minutes down the road. When I pulled in, I immediately saw tire tracks that hadn't been there earlier in the week, fresh enough that the gravel was still disturbed. That put me on edge. I shut off the engine and listened. The forest was quiet in that unnatural way where it feels like everything is holding its breath. I did a slow walk around the site, flashlight sweeping over the trees. That's when I heard footsteps, not rushing, not hiding, just steady, deliberate steps somewhere beyond the tree line. I called out, identifying myself as a ranger. The footsteps stopped. My heart rate picked up, but I told myself it was probably a camper who hadn't realized the site was closed. Still, something felt wrong. The air felt heavy, like before a storm. Then my radio crackled. At first I thought it was incoming, but it was just static, a low hiss that went on longer than usual. When it finally cut out, I realized the footsteps had started again, closer this time. I backed toward my truck, keeping the flashlight trained ahead of me. The beam caught a shape between the trees. It was him, the same man from the road. He stood just at the edge of the light, hands in his pockets, head slightly tilted. "You're not supposed to be here," I said, trying to keep my voice even. He smiled just barely. "I know," he said again. I reached the driver's door and fumbled for the handle, never taking my eyes off him. He took one step forward. That's when I noticed the smell. Sharp and metallic, carried on the cold air. I didn't want to think about what it reminded me of. I got into the truck and slammed the door, heart pounding hard enough that I could feel it in my throat. As soon as the door shut, he started walking faster, not running, just closing the distance, like he knew I was trapped behind glass. I turned the key. Nothing. The engine didn't even try to turn over. "Come on," I muttered, trying again. He was right outside the driver's window now, close enough that I could see lines in his face, dried dirt under his nails, and something dark smeared on the cuff of his sleeve. He tapped on the glass with one knuckle. Not hard, almost polite. "You forgot something," he said. "What?" I asked before I could stop myself. He leaned closer, breath fogging the window. "You didn't check the river gate." My stomach dropped. That gate was still a mile back, and I hadn't mentioned it out loud. "How do you know that?" I asked. He shrugged. "I watch." The radio burst to life suddenly, loud enough to make me flinch. Someone was calling my unit number, their voice distorted but urgent. The man's eyes flicked to the radio, and for the first time his expression changed. Not fear, annoyance. He stepped back. The engine turned over on the next try. I threw the truck into reverse, gravel spraying as I backed out of the sight. He didn't chase me. He just stood there watching, his shape shrinking in the headlights. As I sped away, I caught one last glimpse of him in the mirror. He raised his hand and pointed, not at me, but toward the forest. I didn't slow down. I didn't look back again. I drove straight to the ranger station, shaking so badly I had to sit in the truck for a minute before I could stand. I reported everything to my supervisor and local law enforcement. They searched the campsite and surrounding area before dawn. They found no one, no footprints, no signs of a struggle. The tire tracks I'd seen were gone, smoothed over like they'd never existed. The official explanation was that I'd encountered a transient who moved on. The report was filed and quietly closed, but a week later, another ranger found something near the river gate I'd missed, a makeshift shelter hidden deep in the brush. Inside were food wrappers, pages torn from old maps, and a notebook filled with dates, times, and ranger patrol routes. My name was written on the last page. I quit at the end of the season. I told myself it was just burnout. Sometimes, though, when I drive past forest roads at night, I see someone standing just beyond the shoulder, half hidden by trees. Every time I tell myself it's my imagination, but I still check my mirrors, and I never forget to lock the river gate.